Hi, my name is Grant, and my duty here is to partake in the worthy endeavour of recommending the Addressing Gettysburg Patreon Officers Club, a group I've been proud to be part of for more than 2 years. Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon content is astounding, exhilarating, entertaining, and very educational. Just when you thought you're knowledgeable on every aspect of the Battle of Gettysburg, an expert appears with a new angle or take on it. If you love the Ask a Guide episodes, you should really consider joining the Officers Club on Patreon.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, patrons, and welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking about Imboden's Brigade. You've all heard of them, but what did they do in the Gettysburg Campaign? With me is author Steve French. He is he's a retired West Virginia history teacher. He taught that for 38 years. He's a graduate of Shepherd University, Shepherd College at the time, right? He wrote features for the Washington Times about West Virginia. And of course, he's the author of Imboden's Brigade in the Gettysburg Campaign. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, Matt. How are you today?
Pretty good. I'm excited about this. Now, so we had a mix-up where you had sent the book, but I never got the book. So what we're going to do...
It was in the U.S. mail a month ago.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. But we got a copy now. Thank God you had one in the car there, and thank you for signing it. So since I wasn't able to prepare from your book, that doesn't mean we can't do this. What we're going to do instead is you're just going to tell me about Imboden's Brigade, and I'm going to ask you questions along the way. Okay. Here's what I know about Imboden's Brigade. They weren't actually a part of the Army of Northern Virginia, correct?
They were under direct command of Robert E. Lee.
Oh, right. So they weren't in Stuart's cavalry,
no.
But they were attached to Lee.
It's direct command.
And prior to the Gettysburg Campaign, were they some other kind of like independent operation?
Once he went into the regular service with his brigade, he was under direct command of Lee.
When was that?
In January 1863.
Okay. So prior to that, what were they doing?
Before that, he had been an artillery captain, the Stanton Artillery.
Okay.
And Battle of Manassas, he gets bored with afterwards, camp life and so on. So when the Partisan Ranger Act comes up in April of 1862, he forms a partisan ranger command for the mountains of West Virginia, and he's going to get about 1,000 men in that command, and he's going to be raiding along the B&O, raiding into the mountains. He's under Stonewall Jackson, and Stonewall Jackson's his superior, but he is a partisan ranger, meaning he and his men can keep anything they capture for sale back to the Confederate quartermasters, for sale at private auctions. And some of these sales, not only of Imboden, but later John McNeil, would net $20,000, $30,000, $40,000.
Jeez.
But he's offered a brigadiership if he would go into the regular service. Lee didn't like the idea of the partisan rangers.
Right.
And he will eventually help to get rid of all of them, but Mosby and McNeil in February of 1864. So he goes into he takes most of his men with him. He allows them to vote. If you want to remain partisans, that's fine. He takes his most of his men into the regular army. He's going to have it's going to be a legion. Like the old Roman legion, you're going to have your artillery, McClanahan's battery. John McClanahan is a captain from Texas who married a girl in Stanton, so that gets him here. His brother, George Imboden, is going to command the 18th Virginia Cavalry. These men are basically raiders. They're not Stuart's cavalry out there fighting with sabers.
Right. Ambush,
raid.
Okay.
That's the way they fight. He also has an infantry component with Colonel George Hugh Smith, 62nd Virginia Infantry. It is very well trained. Smith was a VMI graduate. He becomes a lawyer in West Virginia, or Western Virginia. And then early in the war, he's captured in one of the campaigns out in the Northwest. Smith will later be the step-grandfather of George S. Patton. And if you read the biographies of Patton, he will comment on Smith because he really liked the old man. That was his grandfather growing up. And he said when he died, Smith died, he was a great lawyer in California, helped to start the University of Southern California Law School. When he died at his desk, he was age 82, dropped over like that. They contact George Patton at West Point, I believe, and he says something like he was a great soldier but didn't have that killer instinct. He was he had the rule of law in his mind. But so you have approximately between 1,300 and 1,400 men.
Okay.
They go on a big raid into West Virginia during April, May 1863. They get thousands of horses, thousands of cattle. They bring those back to the Shenandoah Valley. So that brings them up to the Gettysburg Campaign. And in June 9th, I think June 9th, about the time of the Battle of Brandy Station, he starts moving north towards Moorefield, West Virginia, towards Romney, West Virginia, towards Cumberland, Maryland. He's been given a few directions from Lee. He's to gather all the livestock he can. Now, they're going to pay for it in West Virginia unless the guys are Unionists there and they're going to take it.
Right.
Tear up the B&O Railroad as much as possible. Tear up the C&O Canal in Maryland. And fight any Union's forces that get in their way. Now, the Union forces were right along the Potomac, guarding the bridges, guarding Cumberland, Maryland. That was the headquarters. And at the time, when this rolls out, General Benjamin Kelly is in command of that railroad division from Harper's Ferry westward. And they said at his funeral in the 1890s, he did more fighting and got less credit than any Union general because he always had these guerrillas and partisans to fool with.
Oh.
So back to the Gettysburg Campaign, George Imboden will, on the 17th of June, he takes his 400, 500 men into Cumberland, Maryland, and occupies it for a time. They tear up government property, state of Maryland property, U.S. property, and B&O. They get as many, buy as much clothes and boots and so on as they can. They make schemes to trade tobacco later on with some of the merchants because Cumberland was sort of a half and half town at that time. And
so,
then,
but didn't Lee? So this is prior to the Army moving up here for the campaign,
right? They're already out.
Oh, the Army's already moving.
No, well, you have Brandy Station,
right,
and then the Army's going to start moving a little bit later.
So, but Imboden's coming up and doing this in Cumberland prior to that.
Okay, he's in Cumberland by the 17th. He starts moving about the 9th.
Okay,
going up over the mountains, and they're taking their time because they're collecting livestock for the most part.
They're on a separate mission from the Army.
Right.
They're going out scavenging to support the Army.
Scavenging and to tear up that railroad.
But wasn't Lee trying to court Marylanders, or was that just during the Antietam?
Now, in Western Maryland, most of the people are going to be Unionists.
Okay,
unless
got
their
it.
families are on both sides of the border. You'll have in Cumberland a number of people are still Southern.
Okay,
Southern sympathizers, but for the most part, you get into the mountains of Western Maryland, you get into the mountains of West Virginia, especially where you had a large concentration of Germans.
Yeah,
you're going to have loyalists.
Okay, got it.
They're not really attacking civilians, but of course, in one case, they do kill a civilian, a guy named Griffin Twig, who, protecting his livestock, decides to shoot it out with a patrol, and he wings a couple of them, but they kill him. And so he's one of the civilians that's killed in the Gettysburg Campaign, probably about the 18th or 19th of June.
Okay. All right, so I'm sorry, continue with the story.
But after Cumberland, they're going to start moving east along the railroad. a large bridge across the south branch of Potomac they take down with cannon fire. And they're moving towards a place called Bloomery Gap. And they'll arrive there on the 20th or so of June. And while he's there, a courier will come into that camp from General Lee and tell him or give him orders. Move on into Maryland if you can, but stay on the left of Ewell's Corps and apprise him of anything coming towards him. If you can stop it, do that.
Okay, so Ewell's Corps has Jenkins' cavalry at the helm.
In front.
And Imboden off to the left.
Right.
And then ostensibly Stuart is supposed to protect the right.
Right.
Okay, got it. Okay. So Imboden is so he's running around out there, he's collecting stuff and everything like that. How far west does he go?
The farthest west is Cumberland, Maryland. And then, of course, they're raiders. He has raiders all through those mountains. Trying to
so he's spread out.
He's spread out.
Yeah, it's not just the whole brigade going at once.
His infantry is trying to pick up horses. Also, by the end of this campaign, they'll be mostly mounted infantry.
Right. Now, did he already have a mounted infantry unit, or is this the start of it?
This was the start of it. He had regular cavalry, 18th Virginia Cavalry, and then George Hugh Smith had the 62nd Virginia Infantry. On this campaign, they'll be collecting the horses, especially in Fulton County, Pennsylvania, when they get there.
Okay. And then eventually they become mounted infantry.
Right.
And the idea of mounted infantry is they don't fight on the horses at all. There's no saber charges. It's you just ride to the point of fighting, and then you fight as infantry.
Right. Fight as infantry.
So it's just, and I would imagine it's easier to keep up with the rest of the brigade when you're on horses.
Well, Lee always said when he put this together, people questioned him on that, and he said in the mountainous regions, the infantry could almost keep up with the
that makes sense.
With the cavalry.
Yeah,
they were supposed just to stay in that region and be a buffer against the Union forces along the railroad.
Okay.
So they're going from Bloomery. He's going to move to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. He's while he's there, he's hunting a famous artist and famous Virginian. You may have heard of him, David Hunter Strother, or he went by the name Port Crayon for Harper's Weekly. Okay. But he was a Virginia aristocrat that was at that time a Union colonel and aide to a general. And he was hunting him. He wanted to arrest him, and he stopped at his house in Berkeley Springs. And his daughter was home. And basically, he said, tell your father when he comes home that he's disloyal. We know, he's fighting for abolition. He's fighting for the Negro, and we want him. And, and they wanted to take him to Richmond, put him on trial.
Yeah,
and so they go to. If you're familiar with Hancock, Maryland, near Berkeley Springs, it's right along the river. Set up a big camp. They go into Hancock and spend a lot of money. Hancock is, although it's Maryland and in Western Maryland, it's a southern town because the richest men in town that provide the employment are Southern sympathizers. One of them is James Breathitt's
battery.
James Breathitt's brother-in-law.
Okay.
Breathitt would go there after the war and become a doctor in Hancock. But they're set up there and camp and resting a while. On the morning of the 24th of June, early in the morning, they head across the river on a big raid into Fulton County, Pennsylvania, headed towards what's known as Needmore, Wolfersburg. It's all farmland. It's all farmland today. They go in 3 separate columns. Even one of the columns is led by a circuit riding preacher who had been one of the pastors in southern Fulton County early in the war, and he's shown where the hiding places are for the horses. George Imboden goes about 10 miles, establishes a big camp all day they're bringing in horses.
Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.